Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Whiskey Wednesday show. I am super excited again to have back for the second time old friend and notable Canadian presence, Mr. Richard Mercer. Anybody ever call you Richard? I've never heard anybody call you Richard.
I was just quickly scanning my background because I thought, have I? Oh, no, it's all good. No one ever called me Richard. Never. There was a brief period where I was Dick, and I put the kibosh on that.
Right.
I didn't want to be Dick because my uncle Dick was Richard and he became Dick. So yeah, thank God I dodged that bullet.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So you've been Rick as long as I've been.
Anyone ever call you Kenneth?
My mom. My
Like
mom and actually, what's that?
All the time or just special occasions?
When she said Kenneth, I knew that there was something I needed to tune into,
Right. Gotcha.
It was the, you might be in trouble or you better bloody listen type of thing, right?
Right. I gotcha.
Yeah, but no,
It's
it was
good to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Somebody tried Kenny at one point, but that didn't work as well. That was like the Kenny that got kiboshed immediately.
No,
yeah,
you don't want that.
No,
nothing against the Kennys out there, but no.
There's nothing against the Kennys, but it's just like I knew some Kennys growing up, and they were just scrappy little dickheads, and it's like always looking to fight and scrap, and
yeah, that wasn't you.
No, wasn't me.
You were a man of peace. I was a boy of peace.
I was a boy of
peace.
I was a man of chatting, is what I was. I could talk my way out. Rick, you've been busy doing press, and you're on a book tour currently. You have a new book out. I have here your old book, which we chatted about years ago, talking to Canadians, and now you've got a new book out, which picks up where this book lays off. And this is just.
I don't have a copy.
What's that?
I don't have a copy.
I've got right behind me here. Look at that. Boom, there it is. It's on the TV.
There it is.
Me just like that magic.
I got Gordon Pinson's book back there, but
was any good?
I have a box, but they're downstairs. I'll just whatever. Yes, the new book is out. I'm on a tour. The last book I didn't tour. There was no real press, no in-person press because of the pandemic, and there were no book signings and there were no performance events. This time I just did Victoria, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm doing Ottawa. I've already done Halifax. I did St. John's. I did Winnipeg, Sarnia. I did, I've done a lot of spots. It's been great. It's been good.
You've been tying some of these in with your old friend Jan Arden, who you talk about a lot in the book as well.
Yeah, Jan has a full chapter in the book, and I bumped into Jan in Palm Springs of all places. It was my only time I'd left the country since the pandemic. I haven't traveled at all, but when I was finishing this book, I needed to get out of the house. I needed to I wanted to go somewhere warm for 2 weeks because I knew I was just going to be working. And then I looked at Jan's Instagram, and it was very similar to the view I had. And I texted her, and she said, oh, yes, I am in Palm Springs. And she was literally 3 doors down, which is bizarre. And we went and had lunch, and I told her when my book was coming out, and she said, my book's coming out that week as well. We should do some events. And flash forward, we had 1,100 people at the Chan Center at University of British Columbia. We sold out Winnipeg. We sold out everywhere we went. We just did 4 events, but they were great fun. It was fun being on the road with her. And she's good at being on the road, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's like being on the road. You only want to be on the road with people who are in the lobby at 5:50 a.m. when they say they're going to be, and that's her.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I hear I don't know Jan at all, but everybody that I know that has any contact with her, she seems like one of the most superhuman beings on the planet.
Yeah, she's lovely. She gets in trouble a lot. Like she was traveling with her was a little interesting because she was tweeting about when Pierre Poilievre spoke into the microphone on a WestJet flight.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, well, there's liberal turbulence ahead, but don't worry, we're going to fix it, blah, blah, blah. And Jan was off her head tweeting about it. And then she got all worked up and said, I'm never flying WestJet ever again. And I texted her immediately and was like, take that down. You live in Western Canada. You're in show business. So I was like leaving. I can't remember where I had to leave and fly to Calgary. And I got up at 8:30 in the morning and flew WestJet direct. And Jan had to get up at like 5 in the morning and fly to Vancouver, wait 2 hours and then fly back. So that's got to work itself out. But she's a wonderful person. Yeah, she's great.
Well, that's awesome. So you're out on the road. You got your new book, which did hit the number one on the bestseller list a
Yeah,
couple weeks ago. Is it still? I'm sure it's still up there.
it's up there, but we were
Yeah.
number one for 2 weeks, and then we were hit by Hurricane Getty, of course,
Right. Yeah.
because Geddy Lee has a book out as well.
Yeah.
And usually every time I've ever done a book, you always have to worry about the hockey player. There's a big hockey player book
Right.
that comes out every Christmas, and everyone buys it for their dads. So that's what you gotta deal with. And my publisher said to me about 2 months ago, the good news is there's no hockey book this year. I was like, wicked. She said, there is a Geddy Lee book. I was like, shit. In this country. Well, I mean, his book is now a bestseller all over the world, but obviously in this country, there's a lot of interest in reading Geddy's book.
You can't compete with the likes of Rush. I mean, come on. You know that of all people.
It's fine. There's actually a chapter in the book about Rush.
Yes.
And I was never a crazy Rush fan, although I took drum lessons to sound like Neil Peart, and in grade 7 and grade 8 from Don Weary, who you probably know or remember.
Yeah, I remember Don
the percussionist. And I wanted to sound like Neil Peart from Rush, and me and Timmy Green would listen to their records. And of course, I quickly realized I would never sound like Neil Peart from Rush, and dropped that. But Neil Peart came on the show. I mean, the show is called, I should talk about the book, I guess. The book is called The Road Years, and it's about my experiences. And some of them are insane, like Neil Peart coming on the show. And Neil he's no longer with us, of course, he's deceased, but Neil famously had a pretty tragic life. And last number of years of his life, he suffered great loss. He lost his wife and child, and he retired from being a rock star. He was only a rock star when he was behind the drums. And other than that, he didn't do media. He didn't do meet and greets. He didn't do anything. He just didn't. He just gave that up, which I don't blame him. But he agreed to come on the show, and he was funny, and he was self-deprecating, and he gave me a drum lesson. I mean, on the Rush drum kit, which spun around and had gold plates on it, and did a private drum solo for myself and Don and John, who I traveled with. I mean, those experiences, you'll never forget those, but that's one of the ones in the book for sure.
And that's what the book is about. It's about this 15-year period where you started after you started the Mercer Report up, and this was highly directed by Gerald in the way it was going to go, and it was going to be, like I've heard you say in several instances, it's either going to live or die on the road. And
the show would live or die on the road. There was going to be comedy, there was going to be sketches, there was going to be the rants, there was going to be all the things that I did previous, but Gerald said that's not going to make the show famous or not. If it's going to become a famous show, it's going to happen on the road, and it did, and I knew it would work. I was nervous because I didn't have a lot of experience just being dropped into a place where I'm talking to an oyster fisherman, but it turns out I like that, and I like taking an oyster fisherman, putting him on television, and making him look like a rock star, making him come across great. Because quite often the people I had on the show had never been on TV before, probably never will be on TV again, maybe never even saw a television camera, for God's sakes. But they trusted me, and I think I don't have a lot of skills, but I became very good at taking those people and making them look great and getting a story out of them, even though they weren't the drummer for Rush.
Right.
And that was, and so the show's about that. It's also about, the book's about that. It's also about, the prime ministers I cross paths with, and, just regular folks. And, it's all the stories that I would tell if I was sitting around telling stories, basically.
Yeah. And that's I mean, like I said, it's from farming and fishing to fighter jets. I mean, you do everything, and like when that time you got pulled around in that car and stuff, what was that thing called?
It was called the Train of Death. We determined after a couple of years that we started doing these segments that they dubbed Host and Peril, because they determined that, or we determined the audience really liked it when I was either in danger or in great discomfort or terrified or unable to do a task that other people could do. And so we call them Host and Peril. And that's why I ended up doing demolition derbies or window washing the Scotiabank Tower or any of these things that freak people out. But things got a little carried away when I actually thought I was going to die doing something called the Train of Death. And what went through my mind It's like, oh my God, I'm going to die or end up in a wheelchair, or I'm going to be severe. I'm going to be about to be in a serious car accident. Was that if I die, it would be a comedy death. It'd be one of those things that people would just joke about, because they'd say, oh, Rick Mercer died. No, that's terrible. How did he die? Was it his heart? No, he was doing the train of death. It's like, oh, and that didn't work out, did it? I remember watching a news anchor report that the president of the Canadian Exotic Pet Owners Association of Canada was eaten by his pet lion that he kept as a pet in his living room, and watching the news anchor report that without smiling or laughing. That's a comedy death. That's what I was in for with the train of death. Train of death, by the way, quickly, 3 cars chained together, like 25 feet of chain in between each car. The car in the front has an engine, no brakes. The car in the middle has no brakes, no engine. The car at the back where I was has no engine, but brakes. And when you hit the brakes, you don't stop. You just go whoosh, whoosh, and whip around and slam into the car in front of you. But you're dying, so your instinct is to hit the brakes, and then you slam, whip around and slam again. And it was terrifying.
Your facial expressions during that clip were
there were. I really thought I was going. And Don, my cameraman, heard me swearing, and he knew that I was in serious trouble, because he knew there was no scenario where I would swear while the cameras were rolling, because we were an 8 o'clock show. And so if you swore, or anyone swore, it was not usable. So I just wouldn't swear. And then he heard me and he went, oh, I think he might be dying. And then John, my director, went, what? Because they were shooting it, and then they managed to get a message to the guy who came out with the flag and stopped the entire thing. But I had to do it again. I had to do take 2.
Of course, yeah. Safe to take, right? Yeah. Absolutely.
We get another angle on that.
You've done so much, and this book covers everything. One thing I wanted to mention that was really cool is you talk about your, meeting up with Belinda Stronach and doing the Spread the Net campaign. I remember doing a fundraiser, it had been 15 years ago, where we donated proceeds to that as well. That was one of your, that wasn't directly associated with the show, but you do talk about that. And what was as a person who has a fairly large clout as a media person, you have to be fairly selective in what you get behind. Otherwise, your face will be on everything. What was the decision-making process that brought you to that one?
Well, I interviewed Belinda on the show when she was a Conservative member of Parliament. She just famously ran for the leadership of the Conservatives. She got beaten quite badly by Stephen Harper. While she was running, she was asked, win or lose, will you run for election? And she said, yes, I will. No one ever does that, but she did. And she ran in Newmarket, which was a safe Liberal riding, and she got elected as a Conservative. I interviewed her, and it wasn't a very good interview. She was great off camera, but on camera, it just wasn't great because she was became evident to me, this was only a theory, that she was very unhappy being in the Conservatives. And gay marriage was a big thing at the time. The debate, Stephen Harper decidedly was against gay marriage, and she was for gay marriage. That was a big issue in the leadership campaign. So she just wasn't content. But off camera, we discussed the work of Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, who's this guy who's doing a lot of things in Africa, aid work in Africa. He was the United Nations lead guy there. And she said, I'm going to go to Africa one of these days and watch him in action. You should come with me. And I thought it was just the kind of thing a rich person says, like, we should get coffee, but their version is like, let's go to Africa. And so I didn't pay any attention to it. Then she sent me his latest book. I read it. I found it interesting. And then she crossed the floor famously. She became a Liberal. She became a cabinet minister. And her EA called me up and said, Belinda's going to Africa. She's going to follow Dr. Jeffrey Sachs around as a private citizen, not as a cabinet minister. Would you like to go? And I always avoided politicians. Like the most, I might have a cup of coffee with one in an airport, but in those days, I just avoided them. I didn't want to become friends with any of them. I just didn't think it would be prudent. But for some reason, I decided to take this trip, and it was quite an eye-opener. We went to like 6 countries, but in some areas we experienced poverty like I knew intellectually existed, but I didn't know what it was like to experience it. So we were in a place where there was nothing. Like there was no economy at all. There were no schools. There was nothing. There was nowhere to buy food. The crops that were growing were clearly failing. People were clearly unwell. There was no medical assistance. And I noticed there were no children around. And Dr. Sachs told us that in the previous year, most of the children had died. And I asked him, like, what's the difference between this place and where we were yesterday, which was only 500 kilometers away, and there was a school, and there was corn growing, and there was a small clinic, and there were children everywhere. And he said, well, that community we were in, they had the inputs that they need. They had, well, for starters, they had bed nets, so the children didn't get malaria and die, but they also had fertilizer to grow the crops, and they had, funding for the clinic, etc., which is what he was all about. And when we walked back to the van, Belinda said to me, well, I guess we're going to have to figure out a way to buy a lot of bed nets. And I said, what's a bed net cost? And she said, well, does it matter? I said, no, I guess not. And we started this organization called Spread the Net. Mm-hmm. And we fundraised like mad people for a couple of years, bought a lot of nets. I never mentioned it on the show because it's just not a funny subject for starters. And ultimately we were a comedy show. And I just never, it was like church and state. I never let those two things cross. And then we did a contest one week where we challenged high school students to raise money for Spread the Net. And we would come to their school and shoot a piece. And I thought we'd raise a couple of grand, maybe, if we were lucky. And it just took off like crazy. High school students from all over the country signed up. And then we started getting essentially hate mail from elementary school students who were going, what about us? Why can't we join? So eventually the contest spread. It was junior high, elementary school, high school. And over the years, millions and millions of dollars was raised. And I didn't do any of it. I didn't raise one of those dollars. It was all students around the country. And it was always the last or the second last episode of the show, and where I would travel around all these schools, and it was always my favorite show. I loved it. It was phenomenal. And Belinda and I became friends, and I just avoided talking about her on the show, and we're friends to this day. Yeah,
it's fantastic. You've had an amazing career, and now with these two books, you've really kind of summed up, your sort of childhood, how you got into what you do. The development of 22 Minutes, and now with the new book, you've talked about, the Mercer Report, and I started to make notes. There's so much to talk to you about, Rick, but all I can say is for people like get the books, read them. It's a really interesting. It's funny still. It's entertaining, and it's great. Like you said, you set out to try and figure out what it means to be Canadian, and you realized how broad of a question that is. And I think that just, in talking to people, and like you say, talking to farmers through to, politicians, you've covered so much ground, and it's amazing what you've done. It's amazing what you've done.
Thanks. I didn't know whether I would like writing a memoir. The first one I didn't like, and I was forced into it basically out of circumstance because it was a pandemic, and you know what it was like. Everyone in show business was told, oh, you have to go home and work. And you're like, well, I don't know how you do that in show business. You're unemployed from home. That's what that means. You started Whiskey Wednesday. I wrote a book, and I never would have done it had I been able to stay on the road or do, work in television or whatever. So I did it out of necessity, and I found it hard to write. But this book I didn't find hard because it's just fun stories. And my rule was I was only going to do a story if it was funny. And I think people can use funny now more than ever. And I really enjoyed it. And I like the book writing business, but thank God I've run out of runway. There's no more memoirs because this one goes basically up to now. So I just have to figure out what to write about next. I don't know. It could be anything. It could be a book about a band. It could be anything.
Well,
I don't know.
You still got a lot of road ahead of you still. So maybe
sure, but there's not going to be a memoir.
It's not going to be a memoir. Exactly.
No.
Okay.
It was enough. Who am I, Alan Doyle?
What's that?
I said, well, we're going to write 3.
Yeah.
Who am I, Alan Doyle?
Okay, before we go, Rick,
yes.
I'm going to do a little thing here. I was just sort of digging through some records this morning. I thought, I wonder what Rick would choose. And then I thought, I'm going to play a little game here. You like a little game?
Well, I have to put my old man glasses on. I can tell.
You got to get rid of one of these albums. We're going to do a few of them.
Oh no.
Monk's
Bad
Bad
Habits. Bad
or
Habits. What a
Generation X,
great
which,
album.
and Generation X, if you get rid of this one, you're also getting rid of all of Billy Idol too. So which
Oh, so I'm
one goes?
erasing him from the
Yeah,
well, Generation X. Wow.
I know.
I love Bad Habits. It's a great album. There's like so many hits on it. And it was,
Yeah,
as far as I know, it was only a hit album in
Canada.
Canada.
I know.
Like, they don't know this music
No,
elsewhere. And where are they from?
they're from England. They're called the Strawbs. It was actually the Strawbs. They were a pop band,
Right.
and they wanted to put out a record. They were
Yeah.
actually called They weren't
Nice
called.
Legs, Shame About Her Face.
Yeah. Oh, it's got
Terrible
all
song and would never be recorded today. Thank God.
But everybody in England turned their backs on them because they were a pop act. So they actually put it out through a French label. And when they were talking to the French person, they said the name of the band. I think it was the Monks, but the French translator called it the Monks. And when they got the artwork, it was said the Monks. It wasn't even the name of the band that they had chosen.
Did they tour here? Did they come over?
Yes. Actually, I don't know if they toured here, but they were majorly successful in Canada.
Yeah, that album was a huge hit, and there was a follow-up album that did nothing, right?
Did nothing, no.
Yeah, and then that really the Monks stopped. Okay.
Next going up here. This is a really tough one.
Yeah, like what am I playing? Who Must Die and Who Must Live?
Absolutely.
Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix?
Absolutely.
Well, I guess I'd have to say, well, Bob had produced a bit more music.
True enough. So we're going on volume with this one. It's Bob has more.
We'd have to say I'll have to keep Bob.
I think this one will be easy for you. Rush or REM?
I'm not answering that question. I'm Captain Canada, for God's sakes. I just can't do that. He said he'd get rid of Rush.
We got Crowded House or Radiohead.
You know what? Both great albums, but I'm agnostic on both of them.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Were you like big Radiohead guy?
No, just the Bends. The Bends I love.
Yeah.
The rest of the records they didn't
I didn't own either one of those as CDs.
No?
No.
Oh, the Bends is a great record. And REM are great.
REM are fantastic.
Okay, this one is terribly hard. You've got Prince and you've got the Beastie Boys.
Oh no, I would take Purple Rain. I would take Prince.
Oh, good choice.
I appreciate the Beastie Boys, but again, it was not something that I ever listened to extensively.
And Purple Rain was part of our youth and part of our growing up.
Sure. And I didn't know you could make a movie like that.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah.
It was kind of mind-blowing, yeah. And well, no one really has done it since. Like that.
No. Bad Brains or the Clash?
Oh, I'd keep the Clash, of course.
Yeah, I knew you would do that one.
Yeah.
I knew you would do that one. How is it you played drums in grade 7 and 8 and you never ended up playing drums with any of us once we got
I wasn't good enough.
Nobody was good enough back then.
I know. Like, had I had my time back, I probably could have. I played drums twice on the show, and once was with the Trues, Not Ready to Go, and which was great fun. But that's basically as simple a song. It's a great rock and roll song, but it's as simple a song as anyone could play the drums on. And that was really exciting for me. That was a real rock star experience because it was in front of a crowd and everything. That was fun.
That's very cool. And that's the only drum you've ever done.
That's the only drumming in public I've ever done. Then, of course, I got the drum lesson from Neil Peart, which was a little nerve-wracking, but
of course it was.
Everything you do, it was always best if you could do something a little bit. I'm an okay skater, not much of a skater, but I'm happy to play hockey against NHL players or figure skate with a Canadian champion because I can skate a little bit. If you can't skate at all, it's really not that interesting of a segment. And so luckily with Neil Peart, I could play a little bit. If I never sat behind a drum kit, something like that wouldn't have really worked. So no matter what I was doing, I always tried my best. It would be always good if you had a little bit of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like there's no point going, okay, I'll try to ride the unicycle if you don't actually know how to do it a little bit. Otherwise, you're just flopping off the unicycle for 5.5 minutes. But I digress.
Which is
let this horrible game continue.
Let the horrible game continue. I know. We got the Stray Cats and we got the Replacements.
I'd keep the Replacements.
Okay. I'm with you on that one.
But these are good, but these are like Sophie's Choice.
I know this is all horrible. And this
no, it's good. And now it's making me go, I should listen to that. I haven't listened to that in a long time.
The last one is very tough. And this one, I don't even think I could choose on this one, but check out. You've got Figgy Duff or the Wonderful Grand.
Oh, well, the Wonderful Grand Band was the most influential comedy act in my life.
Yeah.
And also Ron Hynes, who's the lead singer of the band portion, is Newfoundland's greatest songwriter. And I think you've heard of him. And this is killer. But I would obviously have to pick the Wonderful Grand Band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Figgy,
and also Ron was a buddy of mine. And I didn't know the Figgy Duff crowd.
Okay, well, that makes sense. I didn't know the Figgy Duff crowd well. I mean, I knew them.
I knew them a little bit.
Through a little bit, But Figgy Duff, I think, had probably a stronger mark on the traditional Newfoundland style of things than Ron did. But Ron had a further reach, I think, with his
for sure
his brilliant song.
And Figgy Duff, without Figgy Duff, there wouldn't have been a grand band.
Exactly. That's
it's just all progressive, and there was crossover, of course. Kelly played with both. Kelly Russell, didn't he? Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
Kelly was in the grand band.
Yeah.
Not on that album, I don't think, or at least not in the TV show then. But Kelly played with both.
Yeah, there was a lot of crossover, and I mean, they were all good friends and all that. They were all doing things at the same time. So that one was a little bit unfair, as they all were. Sorry about springing a shitty.
No, that's good. And you have the vinyl. I don't have vinyl, and the world is so weird now. I go like, oh, I don't have that record, but of course I can listen to it in a second on my phone. But I feel like if the Stray Cats was on vinyl over there, I'd listen to it occasionally, whereas I never listen to it, and it's in my phone. Yeah, I don't
That's
like
what
it.
I find
I don't
about
like
vinyl too. It forces me, which is really nice. Yeah.
But I'm not a vinyl guy. I could never. I'd be a pretender. Is there a word for someone who has a vinyl collection, but it's a completely pretend? What would you call that person? Like, oh, I have this huge vinyl collection that I never ever play. What would that person be? Like vinyl for looks?
It would have to be somebody with just a lot of money, because records are too expensive right now to have. You're paying $50 to $70 for a record nowadays.
What?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that. But of course, these are the days we live in, where you go $3.50 for a Kit Kat. Are you crazy? I didn't know records cost that much. Like the new Ron Hynes tribute
35
album
is the lowest you'll get.
How much is the new Ron tribute album, which is beautiful, and I do have that on vinyl, although I have nothing to play it on. That would be like $50 or something?
I'm sure it's 40, 45. I mean, Fred's do things a little bit differently, because Fred's deals with a lot of local artists, so they'll have $25, $30 pricing. But the average price for a new piece of vinyl is $35, and if it's something special, it'll be up to $70, $75.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Well, so that's an addiction I don't have. That's an addiction I don't have. That's good.
Well, that's one.
Yeah. Now I finally got around to cleaning up my basement, and there's like literally 350 CDs.
Yeah.
They're all junk.
Yeah.
But I can't bring myself to throw them out, because every time I go, oh, that's good. But I actually don't even have anything to play it on anymore. And half of them are probably corrupted by now.
No, they'll stay forever. CDs won't change.
Yes, they will.
Nah.
I remember when the CD was on the cover of Time magazine, and they were heralding the CD, and this is how, talk about hype. I remember in the article they said, if your house burns down and if all that's left is ash, people will be able to go in and take the CDs out, rinse them under warm water, and you'll get pristine sound. They were that's how they were sold. Amazing sound and indestructible. And of course, neither was true.
No, neither was true. No, I'm kind of over the CD thing. There was a few years where I was like, oh, CDs are disappearing, blah, blah, blah. And then once I started getting back to vinyl, and as you say, I pay the $14 a month. I have every album ever put out in the world right here on my phone that I can listen to at any point in time. So,
but I hate, like, I just listened to the Trans-Canada Highwayman. Have you heard that album?
I haven't heard the album yet.
It's great. It's great. But it bugged the hell out of me that I was giving them 4 cents and not $5.
Yeah.
Not that I'm running around wanting to part with $5, but it just, and I kind of thought, like, you got 4 great lead singers, Chris Murphy from Sloan, Steve Page, Um, and you know, people like me buying the record. Well, I'm not buying the record. I'm just listening to the record. And what am I giving them? How much am I giving them, Ken? Like
Zero. I
five
mean,
cents?
if you're listening to a book,
Zero.
it's nothing. Nothing. You got to listen to it 500 times before it turns into pennies.
You mean I'm not giving them anything?
Well,
I've listened to it like 4 or 5 times, but
4 or 5 times, probably a nickel.
wow.
Yeah.
Good. No wonder you guys never get off the road.
Oh, it's
What
ridiculous.
kind of life?
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's a great album, Trans-Canada Highwaymen. I highly recommend it. If you like 70s Canadian music, because it's all covered, so it's great.
Well, it's great. And you've got the Pursuit of Happiness, The Odds, Bare Naked Ladies, and Sloan. I mean, 4 amazing Canadian bands on their own doing Canadian super music. Yeah, it's all great producers and instrumentalists.
Tonight is Tonight is a Wonderful Night to Fall in Love. And Undone.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sugar. And it's just fun.
It's a fun record, yeah.
And the first time I listened to it, I intentionally, and I've never actually done this, I don't think, I knew it was all covers and I didn't look. I just was like, yeah. So then everyone was a surprise.
Surprise.
Oh, very good.
I'm going to go give that a listen right now, actually.
I'm a sucker for that era. Some people
I've dabbled into it a little bit.
Like Which Way You Going, Billy? Not everyone wants to hear another version of that, but really, I'm happy to.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'll check it out. Rick, again, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I know you're real busy. It's great to see you face to face. What are you using in your hair these days? Is that a gel or is it a mousse or is this all natural?
There's one right here.
What is it?
It's like a pomade.
It's a pomade you use, eh?
It's the same thing I've used for 25 years.
And what brand is it? Come on, give
it a shot. I'm not telling you what brand it is.
25 years
you've been a bloody case. And I tell you, that was the one thing I missed. After 15 years on television, I had to go buy my own pomade. There was always one around.
Well, Rick, thank you
very much. It's like getting out of prison. That's my hardship.
That's your hardship.
Complains, has to buy his own pomade. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything else is good in your world?
Everything is good.
Okay. And you've ditched.
What are you putting in your hair?
I got no hair to put anything in these days.
You must put something in the beard.
Oh, every now and again I'll put a little bit of beard oil in it. But you know,
that's the thing, eh? Beard oil.
Yeah, I don't know what it does, but I got some. It makes it smell like
that, really.
Makes it smell like wood and leather. I guess it's supposed to make me smell sexy. But
wood and leather.
I don't know. Who's calling me? Good Lord, go away. Sorry about that.
That's all right, Bob.
Yeah.
All right, we digressed,
exactly. And you've got a busy day, and I've got to get back to Allison. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Good seeing you.
Yeah. Best of luck on the book and the rest of the tour.
You were just here, right? You just played the Danforth Music Hall. Or is that coming up?
Last weekend, yeah.
Yeah, last weekend, and I was on the road.
Yeah.
Right, you graciously offered me tickets, and I was in Winnipeg, wasn't I?
I think you were in Winnipeg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we've been doing for 25 years, Rick. Just crossing paths on the road.
Yeah. There you go.
Days we'll see each other face to face again, I'm sure.
Yeah. All righty. Thanks, Ken.
Okay, buddy. You take care. We'll talk to you soon. Good day.
We learned a song for you when you first watched the Whiskey Wednesday show. You said to me, "Do you know David Whiffen from Ottawa?" And
yes.
I did some research, but last week when we were talking, you mentioned a song called "Coast to Coast Fever."
Yeah.
So
David Whiffen. I was spending time in the Gatineau outside of Ottawa with friends of my partners, and they're all Ottawa Valley guys, and they were big into Ron Hynes, and I was playing Ron Hynes, and they liked Ron Hynes too, and then they suggested that David Whiffen was their Ron Hynes, and I can remember thinking, well, we'll see about that, and we put the record on. It was vinyl. It was David Whiffen, Coast to Coast Fever, and in many ways, I believe he is, because, as you know, everyone from Newfoundland and Labrador and your fans certainly know how much we admire Ron, and we believe that he should be there with the Jonies and the Neils, and he belongs there. But David Whiffen is one of those characters, and I don't want to speak for anyone in Ontario or who were fans of his. I think he had a lot of fans, but certainly in my generation, I'd never heard tell of him. And the Coast to Coast Fever album, pretty close to perfect as far as a singer-songwriter goes. It's a pretty amazing album. And so that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to this.
So this is a David Whiffen song that Rick Mercer asked us to play. And it's a song called Coast to Coast Fever. It goes just like this. 2, 3. 17, he started to try some of the things been on his mind. Living the life of a man on the go and having a real good time. She came along with not much to show, but he used to think she was fine. Before she left, the money was spent on a good times, whiskey and wine. Now it's a bar, stools and blinkers. Couldn't sleep yet anyway, but it's low inside. The taste of fame has turned the tide. He's got a coast to coast fever, the highway on his mind. 7 years passed alone at last. He decided to hit the road. With his mind on fire and a heart full of ashes, he carried his heavy load. He played his tunes for empty rooms right on down the line. But before he went, the money got spent on a good time, whiskey and wine. Now it's a bar, stools and blinkers. Couldn't sleep yet anyway. It's low inside. The taste of fame has turned the tide. He's got a coast to coast fever, the highway on his mind. Ship came in, he was tired and thin, and he didn't know what lay in store. The people came around and the rooms were filled. They were busting through the door. He drew the crowds and they cheered so loud. Well, it made them feel so fine. Before they went, the money got spent on a good times, whiskey and wine. Now it's a bar, stool and blinkers. Couldn't sleep yet anyway. Now it's low inside. The taste of fame has turned the tide. He's got a coast to coast fever, the highway on his mind. Sits alone like there's no one home, just staring at the door. Bottle keeps him company and he wonders what it stays here for. It's when he drew the crowds and they cheered so loud, made him feel so fine. But before he went, the money got spent on good times, whiskey and wine. Now it's a bar, stool and blinkers. Couldn't sleep yet anyway. It's low inside. The taste of fame has turned the tide. He's got a coast to coast fever, the highway on his mind. It's a bar, of stools and blankets. Couldn't sleep yet anyway, but it's low inside. Taste of pain has turned to tide. He's got a coast-to-coast fever. The highway on his mind. He's got a coast-to-coast fever. The highway on his mind. I'll admit it, all those mistakes were mine. Yeah, we're doing the weekly guest song, and next week we've got Joey Serling coming in, which is going to be great. And we're also going to do the contest giveaway next week for Rick's book, so tune in for that. But next week Joey's requested a Springsteen tune that I've got to learn. It's great, but it puts me to my task of getting lyrics and chords under my fingers there, which is a fun time.